Welcome to Design Impact, where creativity meets engineering and every design tells a big story. I'm Professor Anthony Reale. Today, we're diving into a quote that every designer should remember. Good design doesn't cost much, but bad design will cost forever. I'm joined by Jason Hill, design steward behind the revival of Aptera, to unpack how intentional physics first design can create an entirely new category of vehicles and reframe what is possible. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Anthony. It's great to be here. I'm pleased that we can take some time and have a great discussion.
You know, you've worked across some iconic companies. You have worked across Porsche, Mercedes, Aptera, just to name a few, and you have given back to the design community through teaching at Art Center. What unites those experiences in your view of design?
A great question. I would start with creativity. And what I mean by creativity is the process of creation and the design process lending itself to kind of manifesting in ways that you wouldn't expect depending on the project. You're either doing something with a very specific goal and trying to enhance something that's kind of well-defined, or at the other end of the spectrum, you have the privilege and the honor of kind of helping to define what that goal is or what that endpoint is, because it's so unknown territory. It's such an unknown thing that you might have an opportunity to literally create the whole framework for it. One thing about the process that is magic and that I always try to put into students as an instructor is give yourself the opportunity to prove your initial idea, but don't close off from the discovery of something better. And thatness in like, oh, that's my idea, I'm going to finish it, can really be a hamper. So that's kind of a long answer to the scope of creativity, right?
So hopefully we're going to pick that part a little bit more, but to give some of our listeners some background as to how we connected. You connected to me after I did the Drive the Lightning episode about Aptera, and I'll link that below for those who haven't seen. My question for you is, what drew you to the Aptera conversation again after all of these years as a designer?
Okay, I love that question. I still, even though, I'm not on a day-to-day, my contract has been fulfilled. I was actually there yesterday, having a great visit on some things that are really positive. I still think about it every day, and I'm not bored of it. It's such an engaging project, and we brought so much in the process across all these metrics to help define that new market space and this unique vehicle. So your question was, what keeps me engaged on it? I can't, there's not a single thing, right? But what I did see was you were reflecting exactly some of the core attributes from the engineering and design side. And those things are very closely related. That is exactly the core beliefs that I brought to the project, the core beliefs that the founders trusted me with to run with. Seeing your take on it was kind of refreshing. It was very easy to go, hey, great perspective, you really get it. And I just thought the way you and Chad were speaking about it was just fun and refreshing.
Thank you for that. I have to say, when you get a good design, it's not hard to be passionate about it. And when you see all those different pieces clicking for every part in the process, you're like, oh my gosh, these guys get it. Which leads me to my next question for you, okay? And this is what this whole topic is kind of about, is good design doesn't cost much, but bad design will cost forever. Where did you come up with this idea? Where did it come from?
Well, remember the quote was when we had an offline discussion, right? And I've seen it, and I'm sure intrinsically have been in this situation too. You can kind of run into the situation where there's a nod to design, but there's not really a respect. It costs a product or an opportunity a lot to kind of either leave it out completely, or kind of use the wrong framing of it and not let design bring its full potential. And that part, you see it all the time in products that we get complacent or we get numb to. My favorite example, and I've been working on this kind of in my head for a while, is There's a product that we see in restrooms for dispensing paper towels. And the whole thing is built around how not to use it. But it's counter, you know what I'm talking about, right?
I do.
It's literally counter to how the human person uses it. And it tells you, like, don't do it with one hand over here. You got to use two hands. Nobody does that. And for decades, we just go, oh, yeah, I'll just pull it. And then it doesn't work. And then you tear the corner off. It's ridiculous. So that's a really stark example, let's say, of like, that's just poor design execution, poor design thinking, but there's somehow inertia for that product. And it just keeps going. Now, the same can be said a lot of, and I love this term, legacy auto. There's so many things that are ingrained that you get used to, even though they're extremely clumsy. The whole experience has been reframed, not necessarily with the electric drive platform, but it's really the rest of the technological advances that remove a bunch of friction points.
The origin of Aptera's design vision. You've been with Aptera since the original Type 1. How has the design vision evolved from then till now?
Let's look at that from the current state of the design, and then we'll work backwards to the beginning. So the current state of design is, and this was one of the reasons I was there yesterday, we have a design that is ready for manufacturing. There is only the process of validating all those parts with all the suppliers in order to set up so that those things come together and make a repeatable, manufacturable, efficiently manufactured product that builds upon the three tenets of what is the cost of it, what is the price of it, and what is the value. And one of the things that design has done for Aptera, and indeed it relates to your prior question, is the value of excellence in design. And I'm including the engineering in this, like design engineering, and the resultant, let's say, aesthetic style. All of those things make Aptera, like the value proposition of Aptera is 3x the cost and the price, at least. And that's
awesome.
A bold statement, but I firmly believe that there's a value in all of the things that we've designed in, and again, including the engineering aspects, that outweigh what the cost and the price one will pay. So
that is fantastic.
If we go back to the beginning, the core layout of the vehicle was established by the founders. So the influence of design to take their vision and stick to it in an incredibly stubborn manner, and not to be influenced towards making it something other than what they want and what they believe in.
Many people think Aptera looks the way it does just to look different. But, you've said before the shape is a result. So can you explain a little bit more into that?
Sure. There was a process that the founders went through in researching a shape, and they stumbled onto some interesting work that was done in Italy. And the body shape, or the Morelli shape, from the professor at I think it's Torino Polytechnic Institute. The founders really believed that shape and its position next to the ground would give them the best aerodynamic result. And they also wanted to have, one of the tenets was less rolling resistance, less mechanical losses. So that's the three-wheel configuration. Plus the outboard wheels with their own aerodynamic fairings. There's a kind of a sweet spot distance where they are away from a body, that they don't interfere too much. And then you want the maximum stability. So if you take the configuration of the physics of the shape, the layout of the wheels, and the tenet of side-by-side occupants. Everybody knows, we could make it much narrower and, one behind each other, but that has much less of an appeal and a broader market. Understand that the market, this is not designed to conquer a large market. It's designed to create a new market space and bring people to a different experience built around the core tenets of efficiency and less waste. So that's a whole topic we could spend a lot of time on. But part of the challenge is it's a car. It's not what you are comparing it to. And people fall into that natural pattern, let's say, trap, but it's really not the place to be.
Well, we want to define things with the words that we know. So if we want to take an idea, we want to shove it in a box that we already understand. And when we get something like this is a new opportunity for a new type of transportation vehicle to be recognized. It doesn't fit into those boxes for those reasons. So how did the aerodynamics and solar constraints shape the earliest sketches? Because you have lots of sketches.
Yes. So even the earliest sketches are building upon the basic shape. You need a good flow over the top, but most importantly, you need to manage the flow underneath the vehicle as it's in ground effect. It's not a free stream, aerodynamic body that you get in like aircraft or, anytime you're out of ground. So that's the starting point.
Can you, for our novice in the audience, can you give a little definition of what ground effect is and why we care about it?
It's the body relative to a plane surface and how the movement over that surface and that body does not rise up into the free stream. It's stayed planted. That's essentially what ground effect is. It's that you're close to the ground. Airplanes have it as well, and I'm not an expert in aeronautic engineering, but I am an enthusiast and have built a lot of. Ironically, that's kind of what led me to this project. I built a lot of high performance but low speed, ultra lightweight model aircraft.
Cool.
Understanding just how slow, weighing like 3/4 of a gram, right? Really, it's a really esoteric hobby that I hope to get back into, maybe in retirement someday.
Let's dive into that for a second. As a designer, how important is it to have those esoteric hobbies for inspiration, for gaining knowledge base?
I think broadly designers are naturally curious and they're not satisfied with the result. And even if it seems impossible, you might get close. And it's very different from, kind of the logic of engineering where it's like, I just want the numbers to work. 2 + 2 = 4. And it's like, yeah, but if we add in another thing, like designers will stay up all night trying to create new questions instead of just, okay, I've finished, I've satisfied the equation. So that natural curiosity, I think, brings a lot of people to this profession who have unique hobbies. One of the things that it's not always an indicator, but a little bit of a, let's call it a red flag, is if someone's too much into cars, like especially old cars, because they can't see past the past. Literally, they can't imagine like something other than spin. And we see this even in designs of, kind of the retro designs. And then they interview the design team and they interview the people like, yeah, it's just like the past, just like what I wanted, but it's modern, it's bigger, it's easier to get in and out of. Okay, but that's a dead-end street to me.
Let's talk about pushing the paradigm then. So Aptera just isn't a car. It's arguably a whole new category.
Yes.
What made you believe this form factor was viable?
Well, they brought to the table a lot of, let's say, data and CFD results that said, this is a really slippery shape. How do we fit people in it? So that's when kind of I came in and they're like, okay, we've got this shape, and bless their hearts, they built one, and it was literally a skin, right? It had nothing, it had no bones, no structure. So I looked at it from the standpoint of you put your people in there, you put them in a position that's not, let's say, the most expected or comfortable, but it's certainly acceptable, especially as it relates to the driving dynamics, right? I'm being very careful not to compare it to like the way a car drives, but essentially that is the essence of what you feel when you're driving an Aptera, and you're very aware that your control system and there's an occupant or there's somebody next to you. So if there's a familiar automotive experience, it's very unique.
So why do you think that traditional EV makers didn't go after the solar efficient, ultralight vehicle market?
I think they did in some conceptual ways, but no one really brought the right level of design. Like if you're going to compete in a space that's existing, you'd probably be wise to be a little bit more conventional. But if you're going to be different, you better be strikingly different enough so that it can survive on its own. And otherwise you're talking about trying to satisfy a very well-intentioned existing paradigm or existing framework, but that's not what this vehicle is about. You can't just say, well, yeah, the exterior is wild, so let's give it let's make it just the same on the interior. Conversely, the aspect of lightweight has always been an issue, but it's not very cost effective, but it is now.
So what kind of user did you imagine when you were designing the Aptera? Like who was it for?
It is not for a defined person. This is very contrarian to what you would do in a lot of designs. Like, okay, who's the target market? Let's really understand their needs. This is a different animal. This is why this has been such a unique project, and it's a unique product, is stick to the expression all the way through of the efficiency. The choice of solar is an interesting one because if we take the original formula and we imagine from 2005, 2006, we could have probably got 65% of the way there, just with the available, even supply chain, but technology, everything. Otherwise, it would have cost, way too much. Fast forward to 2019, it's like, there's really all the things we wanted to do are now available. I don't know if you've ever seen the Type 1, but it had a very small center touchscreen.
Mm-hmm.
Magic, there it was. And that was something we even talked about. Forget the screen, just because this was early iPhone stuff. Like let's have just use the phone. Like forget the actual controls. And here we are with some other recent expressions like, yeah, forget that. Just you bring it. So you want to imagine the future and manifest as much as possible. Anthony really brought the solar to the new version, because he had been studying it, and it's like, look at these cells. We can shape these cells, and they're 22 or 24% efficient.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and they're a little bit more. You can buy cheaper cells, but you only get 20%. So it kind of all adds up. And when you add a little efficiency in every aspect of the product, you start to make a big difference. So we really got into, it wasn't so much how far the vehicle should go. It was how far the vehicle could go. Take away your restraints, like I have to stop for food or I have to go to the restroom. Just take that away. What are you left with? If you took this amount of energy on this platform, could you go 1,000 miles? And the answer was yes. So that's where the 1,000 miles kind of claim comes from. And then we work backwards to your more typical cycle.
Question. When you design around energy per mile, what does that force us to give up, and what does it help us gain?
Super question. Let's unpack that. What does it force us to give up? I don't see what it forces us to give up. It gains you a lot of things. The beauty of, and this is why timing is so important, if I go back to 2019 to current, we've got access to sensors and cameras and software and batteries and things that are allowing us to do all these things without relying on that older framework. So we can now do about 98% of what Aptera's original promise was. And we've enhanced it by the addition of solar. And it doesn't cost, it's not some ridiculous metric of cost to add the solar. You need a panel anyway. It's not like they're heavier. And that's led to a whole, creation of intellectual property that's highly, highly valuable for the company. And there's a meaningful benefit out of that additional solar that it makes it worthwhile. But therein lies the design process. How much solar is enough? How much is too much? We went back and forth. Cover the whole thing, have one really small area, you have to balance those out. That's the fun part.
Designers often think about the look first and then they worry about manufacturing. What did Aptera get right from the beginning to avoid this?
The respect for how it's going to be made. And, in a really perfect way, everybody from the beginning would understand how it's going to be made, and then kind of work backwards to that. Now, there's some limitations to that. And we had a breakthrough in this process with, you can make it this way, but you can't make them really fast enough.
Okay.
And the fast enough equation comes from the overwhelming desire of those initial, orders that went much higher than, let's say, that we kind of suspected or hoped for. And once you realize we have to serve different time schedule, that drove a lot of the methodology towards manufacturing. And then you bring in some outsiders, right? I think you know who I'm talking about. And Then you bring in, we had another person come in as kind of a red team and said like, all right, let me look at what's going on and let me find the weak spots and let me go see what the alternatives are. So we ended up with this process of the SMC. It's not a new process, but again, it really wasn't available for us in 2006 timeframe, 2010. But it's really available for us now at the right price. So the cycle time of making those parts and then putting together the vehicle had this long tail effect of like everything will be starting from a high quality, highly engineered, visible engineering, again, the value frame, let's call it, to put everything else on.
So would you say this was the moment early on in the process where you realized if we don't solve this now, it's going to cost us later? Or was this more something that you learned after you got the opportunity?
It was about a third of the way in through this recent process from 2019. Yeah. And now you have to work the other way and say, all right, if that's the process, what do we have to do how does that have any effect on the outside or on the inside? And in general, it didn't, but it actually was better because you could really understand the core structure of the vehicle. And this is the body and carbon, right? This is the big. The core structure of the vehicle of which everything is either put into, hung on, or connected to is such a marvel of design engineering and elegance. To me, it's the most beautiful part. And there's some aesthetic aspects that I had influence on, but it's not the designer's job unless you are working with the right engineers who understand, see an opportunity, and then collaborate with you on doing something.
So could you share an example from Aptera where design choice helped avoid major production headaches in the Bing?
Yes, yeah. There's a couple places. One is the lengthening of the hatch to the rear. It fixed a tooling challenge and saved 7 figures easily in a tool. It also fixed a customer experience challenge, and it brought a lot of benefits. And then it ended up enhancing. When I first saw the proposal, I was like, I could hear the benefits, but I couldn't see them because what they'd shown was like, that's not how you do this. But I had to hear and process the benefits and found like, this is not a battle, this is an opportunity. So
in your experience, what's the hidden cost of bad design that people rarely talk about?
A lot of it has to do with access and repairability, the way that you have a lot of experience. Some of it, I'll give you my perspective on that. If you've got a fake panel that needs to be there visually for a style element, that really doesn't sit well with me. Now, there are worse things to worry about, right? Than, it's a fake panel and it's another tool, it's another part, but it just doesn't sit well with me at all. But when you're in a different company and doing a product, there's lots of that, and there's lots of opportunity for that style. But it just gives me a bad feeling.
Broadly speaking, can you do a quick comparison between like a startup versus a legacy automotive in that respect to those elements?
I think it has to relate to if the product is trying to enter a market with some unique selling points or some differentiation, but it's entering an existing market space, right? So whether it's a small pickup, it's a hot space, you can see it because it then becomes about style first, even though they'll add like, it's got this functionality, it's got this range, it's got all these things, it's got gadgets, right? You could add, delete, and there's a lot of superfluous there. Find me the superfluous trim panel on Aptera. It doesn't exist. That's something, I'm really proud of. We put a lot of effort into, there is nothing that is, let's say, extra that's just to cover something. And that includes, not being afraid to expose fasteners. This was an interesting one with the solar team. How do we hide these, connectors? What's it gonna, no, let it be. Let it be pure. That's authentic. That is what it is. There are some aspects about, the ones on the interior, on the upper IP, those need to be darkened in order to cut down on the reflectivity. So that's a function driven, not a style driven.
So let's change gears a little bit and talk about sustainability through design integrity, because I think it kind of follows what you're going through right now. So my question for you would be, material and color choices feel very intentional. How did the ethos of efficiency guide your CMF decisions?
Okay, great question. CMF is always a place that is extremely important because it's the first thing you kind of register with your eyes before you kind of enter a vehicle. So you're already taking information of color, and then you're touching it. The current layout with the CMF is a balance between one version and one version only. And we should feel very comfortable and very strong in this is it. Desire from, let's say, customer feedback to offer more. To the after sale is something that I've been championing for this product and this company since the beginning. Not the beginning, let's call it since 2019. And I call it Aptera 3.0, right? Because there was really 1.0, then 2.0 was another team and another product, another direction, another history. 3.0 is really, the original founders back to, let's stick to the original plan and bring all the new things. Color, material, and finish. I'm very interested in finish, more so than color. That's my weakest thing. Material choice is key because you want to reflect part of the value. And this is another thing with legacy. It's like, well, with this price point, we really can't do a nice thing, so we got to do a cheap plastic thing. Everyone's going, okay, whatever. So it's a really strange animal. Specifically, if you just look at the body, there's a hierarchy. It is dark, light, dark, with the exception when we did the all black one, right? The noir. And it also is shiny, dull, dull. And that's on purpose to contrast those two things.
So is sustainability something that you add to the product, or does it have to be built from the first sketch?
Sustainability is not so much about what the material starts as, is what happens to it afterwards. Can you reuse it? Does it have a ultra long lifespan? All of those things, even the details around like the cork, because it's renewable and because it's actually carbon positive, that wasn't, just kind of, it reflects enough of the ethos. It's not a cost issue. We're not wasting money by putting that trim cork in there. And because there's an industry that uses cork in different applications, and one of them is now automotive. So it's kind of a natural fit. We've always looked for a lot of the natural fibers and the composites. It's an interesting thing with our carbon SMC, right? You burn cotton fibers and that you carbonize them, and then you weave them into what we see as like the woven material. And then you put resin and that's the composite. You make this carbon fiber plastic, which is carbon fiber is the only plastic that has a high value to it. But our carbon is actually made from petroleum, like these glass strands. And we're kind of taking the petroleum, the oil, and we're not destroying it. We're actually capturing it and then letting it be used in a manner where it lasts a long time and it can be recycled. You can break it down and you recycle it into other things. So that was a real benefit. Most of our mobility comes from the destruction of natural resources. And now we're switching, or there's a transition and there's an addition, and we should continue to use this natural resource, but in a more efficient manner. The point is not to run out of the precious stuff; it's to extend its life and use it responsibly. And we've done an amazing over an arc of time that our resource management and efficiency across minerals and oil, gas. It's gotten just more and more efficient. But it's still you're destructing something. You're changing the matter, and you're using that release of energy to go.
So do you have a philosophy on how to design for sustainability without it feeling like a sacrifice to the end user?
I do not. I think it's more of an experience that's happened over the years. I will give you a good example. When you drive or ride in that vehicle, you're not thinking about how much energy from the solar, how sustainable it is. You're just going, this is awesome. It takes away all of your logical thinking and replaces it. This is a very human thing. It replaces it with pure joy. And then you can kind of back off and go, wait, how much sun put how many miles? The sun put how many miles in? That's freedom. That's literally free. That's untethered. And that's, there's a lot of multiplying downstream effects of smaller battery, less charging time, more efficient, less resources, supplemented by the sun, and it's not about how much it can do. It's about what that feeling brings when it's doing it for you. And that that kind of goes full circle back to the power of design and how it has unseen effects rather than just what we think of as that looks that way and it feels, I operate it this way.
As designers, I often feel like we fit into this role where we're the connection between the human experience and what the engineering data says. And we're somehow trying to translate this into a meaningful way because most people are thinking about their lives in that moment, not about the things they're engaging with. And if the things they're engaging with are distracting them from that experience, then either, like your paper towel dispenser, it is not designed right? Because it's forcing awkward engagement, or it is enhancing what they're going through. And I absolutely look forward to testing one of these vehicles out and experiencing that. What's one design decision in your career you wish you could go back and change, since we learn so much as designers?
Nothing's coming to mind, and this is not to say like, oh yeah, everything was great, right? You look for the trait in designers, and I'm sure you do this as an instructor, is those who are never satisfied. But you got to let go of things too. You got to be like, that's the past. Let's put that aside. I'll give you the Aptera example of that. I thought 2019, here's the co-founders, where the three of us are sitting down. Essentially, they're saying, we want to do this again. And I'm thinking as a designer, like, okay, here's the chance to change it. Here's the chance to do it, the way I think it should be. That was not my job. And I realized about maybe 9 months, a year in, like, it's really good that we're sticking with the original, let's say, formula. The only addition was the solar, but that really doesn't change the design formula. It actually added to it. When we talk about sustainability and the paint, we love the massive colors, but we don't have that issue. And there will be some paint. And again, it's kind of painting shouldn't go away. It's not the point. The point is, for certain things, can you let the material be natural? So now we have an all glass upper, essentially, right? So if you think about your smartphone glass, but that's your hood, your roof, and your tailgate. And that's a different relation to the environment. So you have a different time scale of durability. Then
and it's not just glass. It's a special kind of glass too.
Yeah, it's the Gorilla Glass. It's that hard, so it's not indestructible, but it's quite robust. So then you have the sides of the vehicle, and those, have material that needs some UV protection, and there's so much advances in the way coatings are. So we chose to start with a wrap, but that's not to say that one of the beauties of the design process, as you know, is you get to understand the goal and then figure out how to get there. So the design systems thinking is just as important as understanding what the goal is. So the goal is to have the sides of the vehicle color. In this case, that silver, the baseline silver, which reflects, it shows the shape off really well. So there's lots of ways to do that. And you don't want to be so like, oh, we can only paint it, or we should wrap it, or you want to keep the process wide open until you can get to the most efficient way to execute on the goal.
I know as a designer, I call it the 5 minutes of happiness is basically what I experience once I finish a design and it gets made and I look at it and I'm just like, okay, now I need to change this and I need to change this and I need to change this. And I feel like there's always one painful lesson in the design that you just made, especially to a designer. It could be like some minor chamfer. It could be some little surface that makes you a better designer in the review of that design.
Yes.
When you're on such a product that has had such a long time to get to market and there's hard stakes in the sand saying, hey, at this point, this isn't going to change. At this point, this isn't going to change. At this point, this isn't going to change. As advice to younger designers, how do you get past that letting go moment and accepting what is going to exist?
And this is going to sound funny, but just look at how stuck the engineers are, and then you'll just get over it. Getting out of that cycle and just committing to something is like, it shouldn't be as hard as it is. But you have a lot of stakeholders that are like, no, it's, it could be this, it could be that. It's like, you gotta go. Otherwise you're going in a circle. You've got to move and have momentum towards a producible object. And then you can test and say, here's the opportunity of when we can. So a lot of those decisions, they come with this preconceived notion. It's like, oh, it can't be changed. Like once we commit to it, it's 500,000. It's like, no, we don't have that problem. That's a legacy issue. That's not our issue for creating a vehicle for the market. We can stop and start and make a change on a singularity if need be. So there's some real efficiencies. One of the hidden things is, and that's again, it's not my specialty, but it's I got to see it, is there's a philosophy and an entire system of how the vehicle should be produced. And it's really magical because you want to bring into it, especially a vehicle startup or any kind of thing, you want to bring enough experience that says, we're not going to do the things that were harmful but acceptable. We're going to take the opportunity to put newer, more efficient systems in place. And this is the challenge when you're talking about, let's say, non-experienced people and people with almost too much experience. You got to find that balance. Like, if you've got all this experience, you better be ready, in my estimation, to leave a lot of it behind, but execute towards the end goal. And that's a very difficult balance.
That's why I love working with students, is because they don't know what they don't know. And they will ask questions that challenge your very foundation on a daily basis.
If you know too much, you just want to go home and sleep. You're like, no, I can't be bothered. I don't want to think about it. And you see it reflected in all kinds of products, especially automotive products. You're like, no. Yeah. But that's an inertia question too. So
as we wrap up, I want to come back to the quote that anchored today's conversation. A good design doesn't cost much, but bad design will cost forever.
Yeah.
Jason, your insights today prove that this isn't just a clever line. It's a guiding principle for how we should approach innovation, sustainability, and long-term impact in design. So what excites you the most about the future of vehicle design?
Great question.
You're listening to Design Impact, where creativity meets engineering and every design has a purpose. We explore ideas, tools, and stories that push the boundaries of what design can do for people, for planet, and for the future.